Hello everyone, welcome back to another Stone Ocean review. This is a crazy review because by this point the anime has already come out. Don't worry, I've watched it. I'll be making a review of that shortly. But today, first we have to cover chapters 51 to 59 of Stone Ocean. So starting things off, Jolene and FF, Foo Fighters, are in the cafeteria having some breakfast. And they start talking. Jolene says, "Where is Hermes?" And then Foo Fighters says, "Oh, you haven't heard?" So basically there's a whole story behind Hermes. Apparently, she got put into Green Dolphin Street Prison on purpose because years ago, when Hermes was only 17 years old, she had a sister named Gloria. And Gloria was sort of started to take over the family business, the Costello restaurant that they had going on, because their father was getting old, starting to die and stuff, so they needed someone to take over the restaurant. And Gloria was very upset with Hermes because Hermes didn't want to continue in the family business. Hermes wanted to go pursue higher education, go out of state, things like that. So they had arguments all the time, and on this one night they had a big fight over it, and Hermes stormed out, left the restaurant, and Gloria was left to clean after hours, and she overheard this argument going on outside. So she went and she saw this gang beating up this guy. The leader of the gang was this guy named Sportsmax. Now, Sportsmax didn't see Gloria, but he saw Hermes as she was walking away from the restaurant. Now, Hermes didn't even know what was going on. She didn't even notice the gang. But obviously, Gloria was very worried because Sportsmax saw Hermes, and so now Hermes could be a potential target for the gang. So Gloria called the police, and the gang got wind of this, and Gloria was killed, and Hermes wanted revenge desperately. So she got herself put into Green Dolphin Street Prison so that she could find this Sportsmax guy because he was in that prison and she wanted to kill him. So Hermes had actually been watching Sportsmax this whole time. And she'd seen Sportsmax talking with the priest at the chapel, doing little taxidermy animal stuff, and also sweeping up the cemetery area of the prison. So one day, Hermes catches Sportsmax at the taxidermy animal station. Hermes has put a photo of Gloria onto a water pipe, and underneath that photo is a sticker. So Sportsmax sees the photo, takes it off of the pipe, and the copy of the pipe, which was elsewhere, comes merging back to the original. And since Sportsmax was caught in between the original and the copy pipe, when the two merge, he gets sort of locked inside of the pipe. And from within the pipe, he starts using his stand to fight back, his stand Limp Bizkit. What this stand can do is, if there's like a dead body nearby, it can give life to invisible zombie of that once living creature. So obviously they're in the taxidermy station, so all the dead animals, invisible zombies of them start attacking Hermes. There's a bird and an invisible crocodile that attack her. Fortunately, Foo Fighters and Jolene eventually come in to help, and Foo Fighters is able to defeat the invisible crocodile using their Foo Fighters bullet, which is very cool. But Sportsmax is able to open up the pipe and escape. So Sportsmax escapes, and he goes and he finds this girl that he hangs out with sometimes, and he starts talking to her, but she completely ignores him. And that's when he realizes that he is an invisible dead created by Limp Bizkit, because the pipe that he had been hiding in had been filled with water. Hermes had twisted the knob and it filled with water so that he would drown. He did drown, and so now he's dead. And he eats the girl's brain that he found, and he kills her. And so now Jolene, Foo Fighters, and Hermes, they go searching after this guy, Sportsmax, and they realize he's probably an invisible dead too. So Hermes and Jolene end up in the cemetery, and Jolene puts out her string so that she can sense any invisible dead that are coming after them. Of course, there's a bunch of invisible dead coming after them because they're in the cemetery, and Hermes puts herself at the forefront of sort of, her and Jolene's defense, because she says, Sportsmax is going to come directly towards me because now he wants revenge against me as well. So the first one who attacks me, I'm going to know that's Sportsmax. And Jolene is like, no way, he's going to kill you. She's like, fine. Then eventually, Hermes does get her head bitten a little bit by Sportsmax, but she had put a sticker on her head, so there were two heads there. So Sportsmax bit off a bit of the copy head, and Hermes is like, oh, that's where you are. So she pulls out Kiss, starts doing a punching barrage. But Sportsmax also did a little bit of clever trickery, because he had separated his head from his body so that his head was elsewhere from where his body was. So Hermes' punching barrage wasn't actually going at Sportsmax's body. But of course, Hermes is very smart, so she saw something like this coming. So Sportsmax takes the sticker off of Hermes' head, and the copy head merges back to the original head. But this also means that the little bit of the copy head that Sportsmax ate also comes out of his body and merges back onto Hermes' head. And so when the bit of copy head merges out from his body, Hermes can see where the bit of head is coming from, and she can attack that area. So she attacks Sportsmax, attacks him super bad, so he collapses on the floor, and that his discs come out of his little spirit, and Limp Bizkit is defeated and deactivated. Now, unfortunately, Jolene is found next to the dead girl that Sportsmax had eaten. So the police decide she's been causing way too many problems, and they throw her into the ultra security punishment ward. This separate building that's like disgusting and filled with like the worst of the worst people who like throw poop at her and yell awful things at her. It's a really terrible place. She gets food with bugs in it. It's awful. But Foo Fighters and Nermis like were able to escape. So now Foo Fighters is with Emporio. They're talking about how maybe they can't get Jolene safe because it's in a separate building. And they also talk about how Jolene actually put herself in that area voluntarily on purpose because she had seen Sportsmax's memory disk, and in that memory disk, she saw a conversation between Sportsmax and Whitesnake. Now, apparently, Whitesnake gave Sportsmax a bone belonging to Dio, and Whitesnake said, Sportsmax, use your ability, Limp Bizkit, to create an invisible zombie of this bone. Reanimate the spirit within this bone, so that I can see sort of what it does. So Sportsmax does this. The new invisible dead Dio eats a bit of Whitesnake's hand, but then it sort of goes off, wanders away. Whitesnake says, awesome, I'm going to see, and just let the spirit do whatever it wants, and then I'm going to use this information that I get from the spirit's movements, along with Jotaro's memories, to sort of figure out maybe what Dio's ultimate plan for attaining heaven was. And this Whitesnake, after seeing that Dio's spirit is back, he says, oh, this must be proof that you can attain heaven. So this is obviously a big win for Whitesnake. So the Dio bone, the Dio spirit bone, ended up in the ultra security punishment ward. So Jolene put herself in there so that she could investigate. But obviously, in this area, she's like at the heart of the attack. Where the Dio bone is, where Whitesnake is probably going to go. So, obviously Foo Fighters, knows, okay, Jolene is in big danger. But Emporio was like, I don't know if I can help her because she's in a separate building. So then the only other person who is available to help, because Weather Report is still injured from the heavy rainfall warning incident, the only other person who is available to help is this pink guy, Anasui. And Emporio was like, don't even ask this Anasui kid, because he's not going to do it. He's a crazy, evil murderer. Apparently, Anasui had like this tendency to disassemble things. Ever since he was a kid, he would disassemble cars, clocks, phones, toys, whatever. And one day, when he was 21, Anasui found his GF, and some guy she was with, she found them doing stuff behind his back. So he disassembled them. He took them all apart and murdered them. That's why he's in jail now. But Anasui's like, I'll help you, Foo Fighters, because he has fallen for Jolene. And, seeing how determined she was to put herself in danger to save her father, that determination completely won him over. So now he wants to go help. And then he's like, on one condition, though, I have to marry Jolene after I save her. And you, Foo Fighters, you have to celebrate us. So, sounds like fun. They go. And then, yeah. So off Anasui and Foo Fighters go. So this guy, Anasui, Narciso Anasui, has a stand called Diver Down, and this is the first time we see it. So the stand can store its energy into an object and then release it. So what Anasui does is it has Diver Down kick a wall, it leaves a footprint on the wall, so then when some guards, go up to the wall to see what's going on, they get right in front of the footprint, and then the energy placed by the footprint, the energy of that kick is released back onto the police officers. Bam. So it's a very interesting ability, and that's where the chapter 59 ends off. Awesome. So I quite like this little series of arcs. Let's start at the very beginning, when Jolene and Foo Fighters are getting lunch or breakfast. I think this was a really cool segment because it shows us a little bit more of Foo Fighters' personality. So Foo Fighters has a bit of a George Costanza moment here. They want to start doing everything the opposite because they think everyone is making fun of them. So Etro's body is asking for coffee, but Foo Fighters gets tea. And then Foo Fighters ends up at the front of the line. They're like, I always get pork, but I want what the opposite of pork is. And Foo Fighters asks the little lunch lady, what's the opposite of pork? And the lunch lady says the opposite of pork is salmon, because pigs sit around all day being lazy, and salmon fight and go against the current. And Foo Fighters is like, I like it. And they make a very funny face. So they eat the salmon. And then Foo Fighters also lets a bunch of people cut in front of them, because, Foo Fighters wouldn't normally do that, but they're doing the opposite. So a bunch of people cut in front of them. And then this causes a big fight to break out among the prisoners, because no one can decide who gets to go first. And so while all the prisoners are fighting amongst themselves, Jolene and Foo Fighters get to, get to the front of the line because everyone's too busy fighting. So that was a funny little segment. I liked it. I like seeing Foo Fighters sort of like, I don't know, sort of interact with the world around them. They're not really human, so they don't really know what's going on. And they do a lot of like unintentionally funny things because they're like trying to fit in, but they sort of are a bit awkward and weird about it because, well, they're not human. But it's funny and it's weird and it's charming. It's nice to see, and I really like them as a character because they're just really neat like that. And I also liked seeing Foo Fighters, after the whole Sports Max fight, when Foo Fighters is with Emporio talking about how they have to save Jolene. This shows like a new side of Jolene. It shows how, Foo Fighters really respects and cares for Jolene because Jolene was the one who saved Foo Fighters from, I guess, like the grasp of Whitesnake. So now Foo Fighters maybe owes their life. And then also, I want to talk about Foo Fighters after the whole Sports Max incident. Because when Foo Fighters is like talking to Emporio, talking about how they have to go save Jolene from the ultra security area, Foo Fighters really like respects and cares for Jolene because ultimately Jolene was the one who was able to save them from the grasp of Whitesnake. So Foo Fighters, kind of owes their life to Jolene, kind of like how they owe their life to the Discs. So it's a very nice little respectful relationship that they have with Jolene, and it's very nice. And it sort of continues to paint Jolene as like this honorable, respectable, Joestar. So it's very cool to see, and it's very nice seeing Foo Fighters in that new light because we sort of always see them acting funny and out of place, like I said. But this also shows that they have very true and genuine feelings also. And again, it just makes all the characters seem really three-dimensional and well-rounded and with lots of different sides in this arc. As for the Sports Max fight itself, it was very, very interesting. I found that a lot of stands in Part 6, a lot of them seem to be kind of like, not repeats, but they share a lot of the same ideas that stands from previous parts had. For example, Marilyn Manson, that could be seen as a combination of like the Darby stands with the Lock stand from Part 4. Manhattan Transfer is just like a singular Sex Pistol. And then, of course, Goo Goo Dolls is very similar to Formaggio's stand from Part 5. But this Limp Bizkit stand is just sort of entirely unique. I've never really seen anything like it, and it's a very interesting idea. And it really plays up that idea of zombies. It's not just this living dead. It's, actual zombies, Sports Max, when he's a zombie, he starts shutting out brains and stuff like that and eating people's brains. And it's very classic, zombie archetype. And it's cool. It feels a little bit out of place because while there have been zombies in JoJo, they felt a lot more like dark and not as submissive to the archetype. They were very just sort of, I don't know, blasé, dark zombies. Not in a bad way, but just, in a more darker way. Here, they feel more like Hollywood-esque zombies. And it's not bad. I like it. It's cool. It's fun to see. And it's just a really interesting stand idea. And I do like it. And the way that, Sports Max himself became one of those invisible zombies, it was a very neat little twist. And I think the way that he then used like his body, which he was able to detach now, remove his head from his body, the way he sort of took advantage of that was nice. And also the way that Hermes was able to outsmart him all those times using the kiss ability. It was very cool stuff, and I enjoyed it. And of course, Hermes herself, we learned a little bit more backstory about her. Now, well, I was not at all expecting Hermes to have put herself into Green Dolphin Street Prison on purpose. I think I kind of had forgotten why she was in the prison, but it was a completely extraordinary twist that she put herself there on purpose to find this guy, Sports Max. And it sort of came out of nowhere, but it was interesting to see because it shows how, I guess, these characters, even though they're close, there's still some mystery around them, and we're still learning new things. And that reminds me, especially of like Anasui and Weather Report, who we know so little about. What are we going to find out about them? But, Hermes' backstory was very, very cool. How she also, has her own honorable, dignified intentions. She wants to avenge her fallen sister. And it just makes her a very complex character. I'm sure there's a lot of regret in her over what happened. Because, if she hadn't stormed out on her sister like that, then I'm sure, things would have been different. But it's very interesting. And again, it just adds more dimensions to Hermes. Because Hermes was already a great character before this, but now we know that, like Jolene, she has her own, dignified intentions of avenging and of revengeance and of things like that. It's very neat. Now, I also want to talk about the little conversation that Whitesnake had with Sports Max that Foo Fighters and Jolene and Emporio all saw in Sports Max's memory disc. So this conversation actually happens in the anime at the end, very end of the weather incident, heavy rainfall incident episode, which is weird because in the manga, this conversation doesn't happen until after the Limp Bizkit arc is over. So I hadn't read beyond the Limp Bizkit arc when I watched the anime. I had only read up to the heavy rainfall warning activated incident. So that scene included in the anime was a bit of a spoiler. I was a little bit upset by that, but that's besides the point. The point is that this conversation that Sportsmax and the Whitesnake had was very interesting. There's a couple of things that don't make sense about it. First of all, how is one of Dio's bones still intact? His whole body was left out in the sun in the middle of the desert. It should have all been vaporized, but it's not important. Also, Sportsmax was defeated by Hermes, and Limp Bizkit was deactivated, and we know this because we saw all the other zombies from the cemetery disintegrate. So I'm not entirely sure how this Dio spirit is still, walking around the prison after Limp Bizkit has been defeated. But maybe it isn't still walking around, and the bone just ended up in the last place it was in was the Ultra Security Punishment Ward before Limp Bizkit was defeated. I don't know. I have to read a little more into that. I guess it's not right to say that something doesn't make sense if I haven't even finished it yet, but we'll see. Either way, it's a very interesting concept and idea, having a bone of Dio and asking this guy who's to bring it back with a stand and then observing it. It's cool, and I wasn't expecting it, and it's very interesting. And then also, Whitesnake or Poochie brings up another one of his little awkward, weird little concepts. He starts talking about how, there's a definite ratio on Earth of water to land. So there must also be a definite ratio of life. There's a set number of things that are alive and a set number of things that are no longer alive. So if the number of things that are alive increases, then the number of things that are dead must also increase to sort of balance that out. So, and then he sort of brings up the fact, what would it be like to control all of these lives? What kind of person would be the one who controls all this? It's a bit of an odd little abstract idea, but it's neat. And then he sort of brings up the fact that, I need you to bring back this bone. So I'm not entirely sure how any of that little concept of the ratio of life ties into Poochie's plans or ideals. Maybe it won't, maybe it will, maybe it's just to characterize him as, again, sort of this intellectual guy who thinks a lot about things and has a lot of weird quirks about him. But it's cool. I like the way this guy's characterized. Again, he seems very pensive, very cold and calculating. He thinks about things a lot. He's very philosophical about things, and he just thinks in a way that I don't think any other JoJo character or JoJo villain ever has. Even Kiro, who was a little more calculating like Poochie, he just had his one single goal, living his quiet life and then killing anyone who got in his way. Whereas Poochie seems a little bit more educated, more well-rounded, and thinks he has a common goal, but it's a very irregular, it's not like a regular everyday goal, it's attaining heaven, whatever that means. And then he's very interesting, very peculiar guy, and I really want to learn more about him because he's very, very interesting. And then finally, there's Anasui. I'm really interested in this guy. I think I just really like the way that he's already fallen for Jolyne just based off of her few actions. I don't know, it's sweet. I mean, he's a murderer and stuff, but I don't know, it's he's not a villain in the series. He's not the antagonist. So I don't know. I'm kind of rooting for him. He's in love with Jolyne, it seems, genuinely. So it's a cool little thing, I guess. And he's also a cool looking character. He's got the pink hair with the little footprints all over him. And then also he makes a lot of weird faces, just like Foo Fighters. I don't know. There's a lot of weird faces going on in Stone Ocean. I really like them. They're very funny, and they add a lot of, I don't know, liveliness to the whole thing. And yeah, and just the whole way he interacts with Foo Fighters is very funny. He's like, all right, fine, I'll do this, but if we succeed, I have to marry Jolyne, and you have to celebrate us. It's funny, it's cool, and it shows, he's a bit of an odd guy. And also, when Emporio is sort of talking with Foo Fighters about everything, I just wanted to mention, he says, she's in a separate building, I don't know if I can do anything to help big sister Jolyne. I just thought that was really sweet. It shows that, the relationship as a whole is starting to build and develop, and they all seem to really care about each other. Also, it just makes you feel for Emporio. He's he's just a little kid, and he's trapped in this whole crazy situation with all these, big sister, big brother figures, and it's a tough situation for him to be in. He lost his mom, but I don't know, he's such a cool guy, such a cool character, such a persistent and strong character. And he's so smart, and I'm curious as to see what's going to happen. I really like these characters. It was a very interesting little set of arcs. And yeah, I can't wait to see. I'm really excited to see what happens with Jolene in this ultra security area, and how Anasui and Foo Fighters is gonna save her, and how this what the heck this Dio bone is gonna be doing. So I'm very interested. Stay tuned for the next video. I'm almost gonna put up a video about the anime soon. I may already have done that, or may do it shortly after this video, but we'll see. See you guys later in the next manga review.